Now, climate activists in Russia say they are suing the government over its carbon emissions. One of those activists told DW's Russian service that they had delivered their case to the European Court of Human Rights after it was rejected by Russia's Supreme Court. The Kremlin has in the past labeled a number of environmental NGOs as foreign agents or undesirable organizations, forcing them to close down their Russia branches. But there are activists who are continuing the fight.
Environmental activist Igor Chestuhin takes a water sample from a reservoir in Penza, some 600 kilometers from Moscow. His wife, Sonia, carefully notes both its color and its smell. Other activists carry out spot tests on the sample. It shows excess level of chlorine, iron and organic matter. This is wastewater from a nearby paper factory, just a few kilometers from the historical center of Penza. Not far away is a beach, and locals fish here.
We do this every year, twice a year, to monitor the composition of the water, whether it is suitable for drinking or not, so that people who drink it, bathe in it, fish from it, they understand the danger of the whole situation that is resulting from this factory.
Many eco-activists have had to leave Russia since the beginning of the war. Several NGOs have been labeled foreign agents or undesirable organizations and forced to close, including the WWF and Greenpeace. These activists are only teens, but they are well aware of the risks they are running.
What we are doing is harmless and legal, but tomorrow it could be labeled extremism or terrorism.
Despite that, last year they created their own independent youth environmental organization EcoStart. Its founder, Alexei Tsetkin, used to be part of pro-governmental environmental movement, but got kicked out for tasting waters next to this paper factory run by a local politician. But that did not stop him. He continues to monitor local rivers and dumps.
The management and the owners of this dump are high-ranking officials in the Penza region. Because they're cost-cutting on waste separation and proper waste disposal, they're making huge profits on this landfill by minimizing their costs.
And their actions have already had an effect. Last year, 12 unauthorized dump sites were cleared in the Penza region, and the paper factory was fined around $5,000 and forced to install water treatment facilities.
If every city, every region, had just one or two effective local environmental organizations solving local problems, our country would be a different place.
They believe the future of their region lies in their hands, and protecting nature is worth fighting for, despite the risks.
Well, Natalia Smolyantseva works for DW's Russian service and produced that report. She joins me now in the studio. Hi, Natalia. One of the activists in your report I thought was really interesting said, what we are doing is harmless and legal, but tomorrow it could be labeled extremism or terrorism. Is he right to be concerned there?
Unfortunately, he is, because right now any type of activism, well, mostly political activism or anti-war activism is dangerous in Russia, but also ecological activists are facing crackdown. Only in the recent years, there have been 4 times more arrests of ecological activists than in the past years, and the environmental group of Eco-Crisis Group said that in 2023, 70 activists have seen some kind of pressure, other charges were pressed against them, they were arrested or even physically attacked.
Wow. Now, you also mentioned that Russia has labeled groups like the WWF and Greenpeace as foreign agents or undesirable organizations. What kind of reasons or evidence is the Kremlin giving for closing down their Russia operations?
Well, official reason to label Greenpeace undesirable was that it interfered in the internal affairs of the state or was engaged in anti-Russian propaganda, for WWF, they said it posed security threat to their economic sphere. I mean, you have to know that before, these organizations have been acting in Russia for 30 years and even closely cooperating with Russian authorities. There were some projects together. They received presidential funds. There were some, prestige projects like protection of, leopards in the Caucasus and stuff. And suddenly they've become, spies and a threat to the government.
So this came out of left field for them in some sense. I'm wondering how important it is for the Kremlin to protect the environment. Does it recognize the urgency of curtailing climate change, considering the extreme weather events that we're seeing that are affecting the entire world?
Well, these events are also affecting Russia, and we're seeing a lot of, wildfires and floods and, permafrost melting. So Russia is no exception when it comes to climate change. And on paper, it does, because Russia also promises to cut down their carbon emissions by 2030. But in reality, when it promises to do that, on the same time, it bans basically many environmental organizations from the ground and prevents them to actively doing their job. And that's also because Russia is a big producer of, oil and gas, and economically, politically speaking, it's more it's better to ignore the climate change for that matter than to pay closer attention to it right now.
And what about this case that's filed against the Kremlin at the European Court for Human Rights? Do you think that that's going to actually result in any change in Russia?
Well, Russia is not a part of European Court of Human Rights anymore. It withdrawn in last September, but these activists actually managed to start the proceedings even before that. So that might be one of the last cases against Russia that actually will have this binding effect. But whether Russia will actually do something about it, it's another issue. But those activists still think their actions matter, because government in Russia can eventually change, but climate emergency and climate change will stay there.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed there. That is Natalia Smolyantseva from DW's Russian service. We appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you.